Hello.
All right, yeah. And let me just make sure you're coming through on the thing here. Say one more thing.
Hello. Hello from
Yay!
Seattle.
Hello, Dan. It's good to hear from you. I haven't talked to you in probably a couple of years at this point.
Yeah, are you still in New York?
Yeah, actually, I just moved from like upstate-ish New York to Brooklyn right before the
Oh wow.
pandemic because I decided early this year I'm gonna join like a civilization and like live the city life and be all doing things all the time. That was back in like February. I moved in to the city, decided it was worth the extra rent expenses, and now I live exactly the same way that I lived when I was up in the woods.
I'm assuming the takeout is better though. It's
Yes,
probably
we
slightly better takeout food.
it is better takeout. That's true, which is good. Um, so yeah, how are you doing? How have you been?
Uh, been good. So also in the middle of the pandemic, so I'm stuck in a basically one room apartment. The coffee shop downstairs is empty. So normally I would go down there in the afternoons and write and figure stuff out. And now I just go down there. I say hello to the barista, grab my coffee, and go. So it's a little sad that way.
Hmm.
Um, we've been working on a new game, Cozy Grove, which is sort of an Animal Crossing like game, and we're kind of in the last stretch. So it's the land of 1,000 bugs. Hopefully not 1,000, closer to hundreds, but
So
and it's
tell,
all triaging and prioritizing and figuring them out and knocking them out as quickly as possible.
when did you start on Cozy Grove?
Cozy Grove's been going about a year and a half now,
Okay,
something like that.
okay.
Yeah.
So give us the so I've just been in a hole working on my own game, and I've only learned about Cozy Grove pretty recently. So give me the spiel. Like what's the concept? And I don't know
It's
how did it start?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge fan of Animal Crossing, and they come out, but they come out only occasionally, and so I thought like, oh, it'd be fun to do one of those. Um, and so Cozy Grove is basically, think of it as spooky Animal Crossing. You're a spirit scout, and you're on this camping trip where you're on an island by yourself. It's your overnight trip, and there you're supposed to find like a spirit or ghost or two and help them out, and then go back home. And you end up getting stuck there, and it ends up being a much more haunted location than you expected. And so there's all sorts of ghosts that you find and help out, and little imp spirits running around, and the island is sort of magical as well. So like the forest will transform, and like trees will spring up, and there's some nice animated moments in it. Yeah, so kind of a spooky Animal Crossing,
Okay.
and yeah.
So from a more systemic perspective, if I'm familiar with Animal Crossing, which I vaguely am, I wasn't before, but this year with the pandemic and everything, my girlfriend got really into the latest one. Neither of us had ever played one before that, really, and so I sort of know what it kind of is. So mechanically speaking, what's I guess like what would we expect to see in this sort of that's different than Animal Crossing, I guess?
So one of the things that I really liked about Animal Crossing, and I've talked to a whole bunch of people about how they play Animal Crossing, and there's sort of um, roughly two distinct categories of player who play Animal Crossing. There's the people who like the sort of slow-paced reveal that happens for the first 3 weeks, 3 to 5 weeks. The first, it's sort of almost the campaign aspect of the game, where you're getting to know the place, you're getting to know the characters, you're discovering like new things that you can do that you didn't know you can do. You're discovering secrets about how the world works. Um, and then at about like 3 to 5 weeks in, that sort of fades off, and you're now in the second stage, which is the longer term stage, which is I think of as social decorating. You're
Hmm.
you're decorating, and you're kind of like in this group that's found some friends that you can share things with. And then there's a smaller group that is sort of like, you know, they're ritual perform, and they kind of like do their
dailies,
social quite as much to perform their daily,
right.
their daily rituals. And it's amazing what the fall off is between the like people who are playing that initial campaign and the people who switch over to the social decorating. It's quite large. And so I'm definitely one of those people. Like, I enjoy that sort of the narrative that's coming out, the slow reveal of new things. And so we really focused on that. So we have a lot more narrative in this game than you would expect in a game like Animal Crossing. There's more character stories. There's more of a reveal of, oh, what is their backstory? Why are these ghosts sticking around? How can you help them? So which is new for us, right? Like, we haven't done a lot of narrative games. The other thing was that, I mean, we still have the decorating. Since it's a single player game, since we're not doing a multiplayer backend for this version, at least in the initial launch, the social decorating is that gets hamstrung a little bit. So that's not going to be as much of an option for people who are into that. They can still decorate. We'll have tons of decorations, but that's not so much of a thing. So we needed something to sort of support that long-term play. And another thing that is a huge for player motivations in something like Animal Crossing is this sort of collecting and building up your space. So systemically, we focused a bit more on that. We made it such that the decorations actually have some functional benefit. They they boost the happiness of various like animals and plants and stuff around them. And so there's sort of a very light puzzle about like what decorations and where do I put them in order to like keep everyone satisfied.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. I was just watching. I was playing the trailer in the background here, and just blown away by the art. I mean, Animal Crossing looks great, but I think that this looks actually like orders of magnitude better. I mean, part of it might just be my bias towards like 2D art, but I have to say, like, just oh my god, it looks so good. This art style is just, and your guys' art always looks really good in all your games, but this is, I feel like this is your best. Were you involved in the visual design element of this game?
I did some initial art direction early on, but sort of a lot of the art style comes from an artist we found who lives in Spain, Noemi Gomez. And this is her first time working in games. This is her first time. She's done some illustration in the past, but this is her first time sort of tackling all the like numerous challenges of game art. Yeah, she's just done a wonderful job, and she's working with a bunch of other very, very talented artists, and it's all just kind of come together. It's kind of fun. Like, when the trailer was made, we didn't have a lot of the polish in, a lot of the special effects, a lot of the like color grading, all that type of stuff that really makes things pop. And so it's just in the past month, like as that stuff's been coming on, you know, you have a good solid foundation of beautiful hand-drawn art, and then you start layering some of this polish on top, and it really is coming together.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, so I've been following your work for, you know, forever. I mean, since we were talking just before about Lost Garden and how so many designers and people who write about game design were inspired by Lost Garden to get into that. I don't know if I ever told you about that Serlin and I both talked about how, well, like, we both wanted to make someday like compete with you as having the best game design blog ever because of your work back. That was like 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I haven't been writing quite as much these days. I try to get out a big Project Horseshoe report at least once a year these days.
I've been noticing that. Yeah.
those tend to be a little beefier. They're not quite as digestible as the old the blog posts, but they're more deeply researched. So maybe there's a trade-off there.
Yeah, so I'm just like I mean, if you want to talk more about Cozy Grove, I definitely want to talk about that more. But I also kind of want to talk about like what I don't know, like where I one of the games of yours that I played actually the most was Leap Day. It was called Leap Day. Yeah, Leap Day. Um,
Yeah, Leap Day, Leap Day. It was sort of a multiplayer Factorio style game. I guess what do they call them now? Production games, factory games. It wasn't really a genre back then,
mhm.
and so we made a. It was our first. I think it was our first Unity game, and worked with a very wonderful programmer, Jason Coleman, on that one. And you could you had these little characters that we called them flan because they looked like little upside down flan, and they would
Mhm.
walk along roads and harvest trees and deliver stuff to factories, and so it had a whole crafting system. The part that was really interesting about that one was you it was multiplayer, but it was very asynchronous multiplayer. You had this central sort of crafting goal that you had to work towards, but everyone had like a piece of the map that was theirs. And you think, oh, maybe it's competitive, but no, it was actually very cooperative because you had resources that the other person did not. And in order to create some of the higher level crafting recipes, you had to trade those resources, which meant you had to build these interdependent networks, road networks between different players. Um, the other really interesting thing about that one, which I don't think I've really seen done very much, is it was on a time loop. So it was on like I forget what it was. It was like 60 or 90-second time loop. So you had to do all your activities within that period of time, and then it would repeat itself. The day would start anew, and there was an idle game component to it where
Mhm.
how can you build the most efficient loop within that 90 seconds such that when the loop repeats for 24 hours straight, I accumulate the resources I need to build further.
Right. Yeah. So I played a lot of this. I just found it really weird and fascinating and interesting. And it struck me that, and so we've kind of had throughout the day today, we've been talking to a bunch of different people, and there's sort of been a little bit of a recurring conversational theme, which is sort of like, when do you know when a game is fun? When should a game start to be fun? Or when should you abandon a game, basically? And so Leap Day is a game that you guys didn't eventually end up like formally launching ever, right? Like you shelved it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we shelved it. Yes, yeah. It was so there was that game had a very long sort of like prototyping conception phase. Originally, it was an archaeology game, and then it just kept morphing and morphing because we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Jason knew what he was doing. I just didn't know what I was doing as a designer. And eventually, we settled on this sort of the factory style play. And then it started really clicking. But even then, we had doubts about it because a lot of people weren't used to that style of game,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted something that was super easy to pick up and super easy to play. And as you know from playing that, that's a very thinky game.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of brain effort to like figure out like, oh wait, why is it doing that? Oh, and
Mm.
you're kind of debugging it.
Yeah.
Um, and so we thought like even though people were playing it for hours upon hours, we were desperately trying to broaden the appeal of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the answer was that don't broaden the appeal. But at the time, we were making sort of mass market flash games and web games. So we were like, oh wait, our retention is horrible, so we need to fix that. Um, so that one actually got killed by not did we find the fun because we obviously found the fun. It got killed by metrics.
Mm.
Um, it got killed by like you launch the thing, you get a whole bunch of people playing it, And then you look at your retention, and you look at your monetization. And mostly we were looking at monetization. And it's like, oh, we can't make a business out of this, and because we can't make a business out of this, we have to kill the game. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another fascinating thing to me about
so it depends. It depends on you can kill a game at many different stages.
Oh, do I still have you? Sounds
Get
like
back data that says that be sustainable.
I think I'm gonna restart our call real quick just because the audio started getting a little bit weird. So I'm gonna call you right back.
Okay.
All right. Bloop. Bloop. Hello.
How's this?
Much better. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing that's really interesting about your work is that you guys are like a real business. You guys like are actually looking at like metrics and trying to make sure that the amount you spend on making a game will be returned to you. And yet you are, I think everybody would agree, you're like a very visionary designer who tries weird things. And that's like, there's not a lot of people, I feel like, who do both of those things, but am I wrong about that? I don't know. Like, I feel like there's, it's like, it seems hard, and I guess this is what you do. It seems very hard to find that area where you can be sort of like this auteur, game designer for design's sake person, and also be running a business. I mean, I guess theoretically I'm supposed to be doing both of those things, but I don't know that I necessarily really am. But yeah, so you're saying that you were talking about Leap Day and how it was just pure math, right? Like it was just looking at the metrics and being like, this is just not going to work for us. Somebody said in the comments, maybe it should have been less cute looking. And maybe that would have been a direction to go.
Yeah. We actually made an attempt. We actually have a version of the game. There's actually, it had art and all sorts of stuff that was sort of like, you are, taking over a planet with your invasionary robot force and sort of stripping it of resources, which is a dramatically less cute perspective on what it used to be. And we were going to release that on Steam, but then like money ran out at a certain point, and we had to move on to other stuff. So that was definitely one of the things that we were thinking about was like, trying to do a cute game in a free-to-play market was just 2 steps too far. So let's back off. Let's release on Steam. At that point, you could still release on Steam and get decent money. But we ran out of time, so we didn't get to execute that plan, which seems like a shame. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of this is timing, right? Like, if you hit the right game and the right idea at the right time with the right market, you can do amazing things. So for example, one of the games that we're relatively well known for is Triple Town, which sort of is I think of it as like, looking back on it, I think of it as sort of the founding sort of game in the whole merge genre that's kind of emerged out of that. That game would not be a success today. That game would be a dismal failure, right? There's no space for a low ARPU puzzle game, even if it's a super high retention original mechanic that like delights millions of people. There's just, the market would kill that almost instantly. And it really took about 10 years of people iterating on that design to figure out how to make money. And then they finally figured out how to make money, and now you've got something like Merge Dragons selling to Zynga for like $450 million.
Right.
But like if we had come out with that same design today, it just it would have been over. So a lot of trying to make a business out of original games is attempting to read the market
Right.
and then attempting to build something that's going to fit that market. And it's a hard problem, and it's honestly gotten a lot harder. We're in an era of maturing marketplaces. So new technology comes out, new opportunity for players to play comes out. Lots of tiny little studios, which we are one of, flood into that space. A few of them figure out how to like make small things that resonate, and because there's not a lot of competition, those small things go really far. Think of something like Doodle Jump, which is essentially a Flash mini game, which had whatever hundreds of millions of players. But then as the market sort of like, as bigger money comes in, as successes start becoming established, people start figuring out the formulas. They start figuring out how to either capture distribution or lock down distribution. Audience gets locked down as well. Like people playing Clash of Clans aren't playing anything else, right? And once they play Clash of Clans, you've taken literally millions of super high value players out of the ecosystem for everybody else. So you start to see a lot of consolidation. You start to see conservatism creep into the designs. So on mobile, for example, like if you're not a very specific sort of highly refined variation on one or two genres, you're basically dead in the market. So that's the stage we're in right now. Mobile has become much more mature. Steam has become dramatically more mature. Consoles are about the same maturity as they've always been for a while, but that's always been a hard market to break into.
I see what you're saying with the sort of like consolidation and this like calcification of certain like models, and at what point, what triggers that to loosen up? Is it just technology, or like rather the emergence of new platforms? And is that something we're ever gonna like see again, or like some part of me sort of feels like we're just gonna have this like Clash of Clans world, for another 10 years at this point.
So that's one of the fascinating things about media platforms is they don't go away in the way that people think that things go away. People always imagine that stuff ends with a bang, and that's not the case. Consoles were supposed to kill PC games, right? What happens? Now there's a console and a PC market. Mobile games are going to kill console. What happens? There's now a PC, a console, and a mobile market, right? So once you've got an audience, it's almost like a generational thing. Like once you've got an audience of like old farts who like playing console games or PC games, like that market is going to keep going along until those people die off. The Clash of Clans market, we've got that for probably, I don't know, at least another 20 years, right? At least a generation. I'm curious to see how exactly that evolves. That one's sensitive to the platforms, like if Google or Apple, because it's basically a two company market, right? If either one of those companies like change stuff up, then those could suffer. But yeah, those are going to be there for a while. In terms of new platforms, it's really random.
Right.
So, for example, we just released a game recently called Alpha Bear Hustle on Snapchat.
That's right. I mentioned
most people don't even know that you. Yeah,
I remember you mentioning that.
Most people don't even know that you can play games on Snapchat, right? And this is a game, and so you can release a game on one of these like strange platforms that has a lot of players. And not a lot of games, and you can get millions and millions of players on that platform.
How did that go, by the way?
So it was interesting. I can't talk too much about the numbers or anything, but it was a fascinating project because you basically are doing synchronous multiplayer with small groups of close friends, and that pretty much never happens outside of local multiplayer. So it's a very unique design space.
So yeah, like I did not even know Snapchat had games. I don't really use Snapchat, but I guess that's kind of the thing, is that we need to be not just looking out for like markets, but actually, or not just like, because what I would typically think of is like, okay, so I have like these kinds of games I want to make. Where is there some overlap between that circle and the circle of things that people actually seem to want to be playing right now? And then also on top of that, you have a third circle, which is like, what are some platforms where there hasn't been this huge influx of money and this sort of these design, all the players are eaten up by these two or three major game companies, right? So there's like there's these three circles that you have to sort of navigate, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of those, I mean, we've made games for a lot of new platforms. Like we made a VR game, which I don't think anyone's heard of because I think about 200 people played it. And it was I love the design. It's one of my favorite designs I've ever done.
Which game?
It's called Beartopia. It was one of the games that got me started on this Animal Crossing kick. It's basically it was borrowed from Leap Day a little bit. It's a multiplayer Animal Crossing, but it's set in a daily time loop, just like Leap Day. And you've got little workers that you can tell what to do and how to harvest stuff. And you've got your main worker, who's sort of the builder. And you're on a little island with a bunch of other players, and you're all building stuff and organizing your workers to do things. But that was on Google's Daydream project, and Daydream is shut down now. Daydream doesn't exist anymore. So you can invest in these new platforms, and there's not a lot of people there, but there's not a lot of other developers there, but there's also not a lot of players there. So
or like security
that can bite you.
Yeah, especially if like, you want to make like, so my thing is like, I want to make a game that I can, update for 5-10 years or whatever into the future. And so for me, like, I really value the idea that I know this platform will be around, 5 years from now,
Right.
10 years from now.
And this is where cross-platform really comes into play. So I'm a huge believer in cross-platform. This is like this exact pattern to a certain degree happened to Don't Starve. Don't Starve, very, very successful game by Clay. I think the original version of it, there may have been some other stuff going on, but one of the original versions of it was basically for the Chrome Web Store, which is something that a lot of people don't know.
Huh.
Chrome Web Store was essentially a new platform, right? There was a platform who was trying to like get games to it. They were giving out money to help developers put games on that platform. Now, one of the things that they did that was really, really smart is they made that a cross-platform game and obviously moved it to Steam and a whole bunch of other places. And so that initial like seed of the new platform was enough to like give them the resources to make a game that could then spread elsewhere.
Very cool. So Frank is in the chat. Do you want to bring him in and into the conversation and just talk about whatever happens here? Like have a random conversation with
Sure.
Frank?
Is this Frank Lantz?
Yeah. Please barge. I could use his. He can sort of co-host for me and ask you some questions. Because I need to preserve my voice. I've been going all day. I'm going to be going until the evening times, but I want to have more Dan excellent stuff here.
Yeah.
1 second. How do I do this? Because we're talking on Skype. Do I have Frank on Skype? I've got Frank on Skype. Pretty sure. We should add him, or if you have Frank on Skype, you can add him in. I don't know if you do.
I don't know if I have Frank on Skype. Me.
I have James on Skype. Oh, I do have him. Let's see. I'm adding you, Frank. Or I'm gonna try to. Yeah, Frank, just go on. What's it called? Go on Skype. We're Skyping today. This is Skype time. Let's see, how do I do this? Oops, nope, not that. Not that. Sorry, Dan. New chat, group chat. 1 second, everybody. Figuring this out. Bloop, bloop, and blop. Done. Yeah. And call. Nope. Not that. Right, more people. Oh, I added them to the conversation. All right, cool. I think this should work. Maybe. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
You want to go on video?
You decide.
Okay.
You're the ringmaster.
All right, let's do it.
I'll just do voice because Dan's just doing voice.
All right, fine. We'll do just voice then. Dan, you still there?
I'm still here.
Whoa!
Hello,
Hi,
Frank.
Dan. Hi.
We were just talking about random things.
We are talking about random things.
Enjoy it.
Frank, do you have any questions for Dan?
I do. How do you make money from video games, Dan? I'm going to go back to that topic.
I was going to ask that too.
I'm telling you, because you have it figured out. You put a lot of time and energy into thinking about those issues.
Oh, I'm hearing some echo, Dan. I don't know if you want to put on some headphones or something, maybe.
No, I've got headphones on.
Oh,
let me double check that it's going through the right audio
or
here.
maybe Frank, you got the stream on or something. I don't know.
Yeah, let me mute the stream. Hang on.
There you go. That'd be it.
Okay, I'm muting the stream. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, my question is just, Dan, you've thought a lot about this and have carved out a nice, healthy zone for making games and making money from games. I still find it baffling. You know, I can't tell you how often I'll be developing something and really have no clue. Should I bring this to a publisher? Should I just put it out there for free and try to build an audience and then magically figure out some way to make money from it? Should I, go to the App Store, and is it just freemium or not? It's just, I still find it incredibly baffling. So I don't know how you guys think about this. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on the contemporary landscape for making games and making money.
So it's a lot uglier underneath than it looks from the outside, to be completely clear. Yeah, is everything going on? Like, I see you gesticulating, but I don't know if audio is coming through.
I hear you fine. Frank, can you hear Dan?
I can hear. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right, seems good.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like any company, like some days are skin of the teeth, and the deal comes through or the deal doesn't come through. It's not necessarily a sustainable business, making games. It's not the sort of thing that, if you want a steady job and a steady income, that's always a smart thing to approach. I'd start from that place first. And then the question is sort of like, how do we get by with the skin of our teeth? And a lot of it is excellent business development, to be quite honest. David Edery, my co-founder, he just has a wonderful network of folks that he talks to, and he keeps his ear out for opportunities. And then when the right opportunity comes along, we try to go for it.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of being an advantage gamer, an advantage gambler. So there are people who make a living in Las Vegas. They make a living from slot machines. Now, slot machines are famously negative EV, but if you track all of the jackpots and you track all of the bonuses and you track the promotions that different casinos are offering, then you can turn that into a just slightly positive EV thing. So you're still gambling, but by doing the kind of like by really understanding the landscape and the platforms and the deals and getting on like Apple Arcade is an example of this, right? Like no one's making money on Apple Arcade except the people who Apple paid to make a game for Apple Arcade. You know, it's lots of things like that. Is that how you guys see it as well?
For the most part, yeah. That's so there's income from games, and then there's income from deals, and then there is sort of cross-platform releases. Sort of the ideal situation, which happens only a certain percentage of the time, is there's a platform that's excited about something you're doing. They pay you some money to make it happen. Then you take that game and then you put it on other platforms when you can. There's exclusivity. There's a whole bunch of different requirements there that you have to navigate, such that you have a paid-for game that is somehow making some additional incremental income. And then you do that multiple times, and that's sort of the ideal situation. It honestly doesn't happen very often. Like sometimes platform requirements are such that you can't easily go cross-platform.
Yeah.
Sometimes the platforms are antagonistic to each other in terms of business models. Like a mobile free-to-play game just doesn't work well on Steam. And so we're constantly trying to figure out like how to sort of make that Venn diagram of how the different platforms overlap and where the opportunities to get money and where we can sell it in the future, make sure all those things align. But it's a constant dance. It's a constant sort of juggling act. Yeah.
Dan, would you ever consider like Spry Fox making a hardcore game?
They were just talking about that before with Leap Day, right?
Yeah. Is that something you guys have ever kicked around?
We did. Yeah. So we actually and this is sort of a self-discovery moment for us. So we made an MMO called Steambirds, which was a very hardcore shoot 'em up sort of game. I think like as a studio and as just how our culture is, we're not necessarily the right people to make that type of game. Like in order to make no one should do this, but if you were to make a competing MOBA, for example, you should have people who are deeply into MOBAs and they live and breathe it and they can talk about the nuance and they know why the timing of this particular feature at this particular moment with this particular animation is going to be 5% better than the thing that exists. And the types of things that we are into are softer. They're softer. They're like a huge percentage of players that play our games are women who are not interested in traditional hardcore games.
What about the Spry Fox team itself? What do you guys play? What are your?
It's all over. It's all over the place. Like we have a handful of people who will play League of Legends. We have people who play. We have a lot of people who play Animal Crossing. We have a handful of people who play mobile games of various sorts. I mean, it's quite diverse. It's very diverse. But even if we had the individual players who are interested in it, that somehow has to intersect with this company culture, such that the way we communicate, the way we talk about things, the way we value things, results in a game that's good. And so, to a certain degree, it's fascinating how company culture filters what you can make as a company.
Are you guys board gamers over at Spry Fox? You guys, back when we were allowed to get in the same room and play games together, you guys do that?
We have some people who are board gamers. We have some people. There's probably a larger, I'd say, RPG contingent, which is a little less board game focused and a little more role-playing game, of various sorts. Story games, GM-less role-playing games are a big deal here.
Cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Dan, because Frank brought up the idea of pitching. I know that you don't work with publishers usually, right? Or do you?
So that's as I was saying, the market's maturing, so we've been doing a lot more pitching lately.
Okay.
And that's honestly been a skill that I've had to learn. Like if you looked at our early games, they were they were essentially unpitchable. We would say we're going to go into a hole for a while, prototype something, and we literally have no idea what the theme is going to be. But we're going to find some fun mechanics, and we're going to sort of turn that into a game eventually.
Right.
And pitch folks listening to pitches do not want to hear that.
Well, let me go on with that a little bit. What do they want to hear? I guess, and then I have a specific question for you with regards to this. Kyle Kushtel put together this this chart of when, if ever, you should pitch your game. That I want to get your response to. But what do they want to hear in a pitch? What have you learned? Give us some tips.
So they want to know that the team's excited about it. So like your personal excitement and your ability to sell the game is actually dramatically important in this situation. Like, are you convincing? So a lot of times, like the fundamental truth of pitching any game is someone's going to give somebody a lot of money, and it comes into a very human thing. Do they trust that person is going to turn their money into something good?
Into more money, really, right?
Into more money. And at a fundamental level, that's what a pitch is about.
Okay.
It's not about it's to a certain degree not about the game at all. It's about this relationship between someone giving you money and they trust you enough to make something good. And so, like, this is one of the reasons why these mature markets are really brutal for a lot of independent developers, because they're unknown, and so how can you trust? Now there's a lot of stuff that goes on top of that fundamental issue, though. Like there's a lot of requirements of what they're looking for and market fit and so on and so forth. And so there's a ton of stuff that makes it a little more rational than just like the gut check of do you trust them? But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So there are certain people who are extraordinarily charismatic. And you put this charismatic person in a room and people will sign their games.
Right.
So the other things that people are looking for is usually there's a portfolio of games they're trying to put together and a strategy that they're looking at the market. So to a certain degree, you want to ask them what they're looking for, which seems like an obvious first step, but a lot of people don't do it. If you say, I've got a game, please fund it. Well, like, what are they looking for? What are they interested in? Like, what types of things are they trying to do? And then you can kind of understand how your game fits with what they're funding. And that's an important step as well.
Now, you guys have also put out games without self-published games as well, right? And I want to know why should one ever do that, or should one always try to pitch their game? Or is sometimes it's just not even a worthwhile endeavor to even try pitching? You're better off with this game just doing it on your own. What do you think?
So it used to be that, and I think this conversation still happens, which is like, the publisher is going to bring all these marketing resources and expertise to the table, and that can happen if you find the right partner. Mm-hmm. But for a smaller developer, a lot of the reasons why you go seek external funding is mitigating downside risk. Like, if the game fails, which a lot of games do, does this put you out of business? And so a lot of times you're looking for funding because you want to basically say, oh, my upside won't be as large because, they're taking a percentage of the revenue, but at least I'll still be in business and be able to make games. Mm-hmm. So often, you're looking for, is this a deal that if everything goes south, I'll still be around? And not everybody values that, right? There are certain studios that the studio is literally created for one game. And they don't care if the studio goes away if that game fails. The other thing is personal, you want somebody else's money, you don't want to put your money on the line because it might go away. again, the key idea here is portfolios. Like larger publishers are basically funding a portfolio of games, so they get to spread the risk across multiple games. So it's actually less risky for them to take on an additional project versus an individual taking on an additional project and funding it themselves.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I follow. Yeah, because I wanted to. I don't know if you can see the stream right now, but I wanted to get your take on this this chart that Kyle Kushtel, who's my next guest, put together. He's making a 2D tactics game with a heavy focus on like modability, and it's very much like along the lines of the kind of game I'm making. So I'm interested to see his opinion on. This is a working guide to understanding when, if ever, you should pitch your game. And it's got two axes. Can you see this?
Is there a link someplace?
Yeah, I put it in the Twitch chat, but also if you're looking at the Twitch, you can see it. I can also send it to you on Discord. I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. Boom.
Clearly, I have too many windows open.
Huh. So yeah, Frank, can you see this as well?
Yeah, I need you to explain it to me, though. What am I looking at here? I'm having a little trouble.
I know, I had trouble with it too.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, so what really helped me was to scroll down a lot and look at he sort of buried the lead here a little bit, because if you go look at this one, I don't know if this link will work, but there's one that has the zone of dismay on either side, and those are the areas where you're not supposed to pitch your game, because the cost to comply, like this is basically like how long it takes to create a game. I'm realizing now that I'm not necessarily going to be able to explain this very well. But there's a pitching sweet spot is the concept. And I understand the basic premise of a chart like this, which is that there's certain kinds of games where like 2D tactics games, 3D tactics games, apparently MMOs. These games it takes so much time and energy to create them, and so much resources to create them, that by the time you could pitch it, it's like you've already made the game. And that's sort of how I'm making a 2D tactics game right now myself. And I sort of do feel that way. Like once it's ready for me to pitch it, I could just launch it. You know what I mean?
Got it. So the sweet spot is games that are clearly going to work, or that have a positive signal early enough that you can get leverage from having an investor, having someone invest in them.
I think so, but I'm not sure if does that sort of map to your
What's wrong with the early? Why is there a zone of dismay on the left?
Well, I think because adventure games, immersive experiences, those kinds of things require a certain amount of like content for them. It's all about it. They're kind of expensive in a different way. Maybe that I'm not so sure. Got it. I'm gonna have Kyle on soon.
Got it. Low systemic complexity means high asset requirements.
Yeah. Total cost. Heavy art, complex systems. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is so when you're pitching something, people are a lot of times looking at like market opportunity and risk, right? Those are sort of two things, and a lot of times people will look at market opportunity in terms of player fantasy, in terms of existing mechanics that are proven that they know map onto things. For the most part, the error of I'm proving out these unique mechanics and then trying to get somebody to fund it, that's kind of over. Like for the most part, like that world doesn't exist anymore. Like even if you make a game that is, I mean, so there's a couple of places where it does exist. The hyper casual space in mobile, like make a game, put it through our AI analytics system, and we will determine what your potential future revenue will be, and then we will screw you out of all profit. So there are some weird niche ecosystems that do that. But for the most part, like publishers who are funding stuff are looking like, what are your comparables? Are you a team that we think is going to be able to accomplish this? and does it fit into our portfolio? And if all those things sort of align, then the pitch might go through. Yeah,
but you're saying it has nothing to do with like having obviously like some kind of like novel gameplay concept or something like that. Like that's orthogonal to the whole question.
Right. So you've seen the discussion about hooks lately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hooks are really about where it comes down to in terms of novelness. Really, it's not that you actually have a mechanical hook that is proven out and people can play it and see. It's more like, in a 30-second video, can you explain something that sounds like it would be a mechanical hook or a thematic hook or some sort of thing that excites players?
Mm-hmm.
And so the proving it out is, it almost doesn't happen at that stage. That would happen maybe more during the green light. If you promise something during a pitch that's kind of crazy, like we're gonna have, AI that reads your mind or something like that, right? Then people would flag that as a risk. But let's say they believe you, it fits into their portfolio, and there's examples of stuff that's similar that they can believe in. Then you might get to a future stage where like, oh, it's a vertical slice, and now you need to prove out, hey, does your AI read people's minds? And then at that point, the project may die. So. It's a lot of the mechanical prototyping is being pushed into the vertical slice milestones, as opposed to necessarily at the pitch stage.
Where is this hook conversation? I haven't seen this. Where are people talking about hooks?
The hook conversation is, oh my God, this is where people ask me names and I have a horrible name.
I love
names.
Hooks. I love talking about hooks.
This is a fellow up in Vancouver made the cool Rhythm Zelda game.
Ryan Clark.
Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, the Clark tank.
Yeah,
what's his name? Ryan Clark. Oh, Ryan Clark.
Ryan Clark. Yeah.
If you search for Ryan Clark and
Titans of Industry, Industries of Titan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ryan Clark thinks a lot about this stuff, and so it doesn't surprise me that he's talking about this. Yeah, it's really interesting with mechanics. I always tell my students that you can't ever pitch a game by describing the mechanics. Like even people who love mechanics, even wonky game designer people, like you gotta give them the thing where it's like, you can't describe, like, you can't ever. In my experience, it never works to verbally describe a mechanic and have that be the hook. It always has to be something more.
Yeah.
Do you think that has something to do with, we were talking earlier about like, I guess like games literacy or game design literacy or, systemic literacy?
Maybe these things are related. Maybe they're related. It's like dancing about architecture or something. Like you have to, you have to feel the mechanics to know to know that you want them. Like if I say, look, it's an auction, only you're bidding for the player on your left, right? Like maybe the three of us are intrigued by that.
Right.
But
maybe
nobody else is.
Right.
But if I tell you, oh, it's a game where there are dragons, but the dragons are imaginary, but they can actually kill people, right? And so there are these little kids who are dreaming up these imaginary dragons, but then they kill people. Like that is a thing that, oh, okay, I would like to see how that works out. And then under the hood, there's going to be an auction where you bid for the player on your left. But like those two things, like one of them works as a hook, and the other one is the thing that's the actual hook that actually hooks the brain into wanting to do the thing over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan talks about the hook and the sinker. And the sinker is a little more long term, but a perspective that I've really found incredibly useful in this is this idea of player fantasies. In that, like what you just said about like dragons and imagining dragons, and let's call it Imagine Dragon, and that kill people, like that is immediately evocative. I can imagine what that world is. I think we've all had vague fantasies in that sort of universe. And to a certain degree, you're sort of like creating an evocative entry into an existing universe of human dreams, human ideas, human things that excite people. And in the pitch phase, one of the things that I find most useful is I'm saying, this is the player fantasy that I have that I'm going to describe to you. This is what I want the game to be about. It's going to be spooky Animal Crossing with little spirit scouts and glowing eyes. And then I ask people, what do you think happens in that? And if you've actually tapped into an authentic player fantasy, they'll be able to tell you. They'll be able to say like, oh, this is what happens here. And then there's a fireplace that talks to me. And then there's going to be these ghosts and they're going to be scary and they're going to chase me and so on and so forth. And like, they will literally describe the emotional gameplay beats that you somehow have to capture in your game.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do all of them, but like a player fantasy should be a generative seed that you give to a player, and then they expound upon it with great enthusiasm, even if they know absolutely nothing about your game. And if you have that starts to you start to have the foundation of a pretty good pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I will say has changed for me over the years is I used to be very much in that kind of game designer space where, you know, I think of it as, okay, what our job is to make this great system that people are going to love, and oh wow, the website actually loaded, hey, yay, that people are going to really love a lot, and because of its, you know, emergent complexity and its depth and it's all these, you know, things which, you know, I think are real, and then we have to figure out some like gimmicky thing to like trick people into playing the thing that they would like anyway. And over the years, I've changed that to recognize that, no, actually, even for me, even for everybody, like the theme and the fantasy and the mechanics are more interrelated, and it's you know, we've all been aestheticized to find certain things fun, and that is very much that is all tied in with theme as much as it is with mechanics. So I've noticed that in my own games, and we were just talking about this recently about, you know, making, and I'd like to get your take on this, Dan, but the idea of like, you know, oh, you should make a game, and when you first start, it should just have no artwork, and it should just be like, you know, green circles and dots and abstract things, because, you know, obviously you don't want to waste any art on this game that may be bad and not go anywhere. And in my experience, it's like, I love that as an idea, but then in my experience, when I actually try to do that a lot of the times, I find that fantasy element is actually like crucially important to the thing even sort of working. Even for me, as someone who is like, you know, at probably one end of this spectrum of, or maybe I'm not at the end of the spectrum as much as I sort of had thought of myself as, I'm not sure. But yeah, I'd like to, what do you think about that?
The problem with squares and circles is they have no affordances, right? Like it's imagine a door that doesn't look like a door. It doesn't have a doorknob, and you're prototyping a door, and you say, look at this awesome door, and it is a blank square 3 feet up, and it's, you know, 2 by 2, and if they happen to rest their palm upon it, because it's a touch interface, it transforms into a door that they can travel through, right? You've basically just removed every sort of mental schema that they have for interacting with that object. So to some degree, theming is functional. So you basically need to theme stuff to a functional level such that people can activate those mental schema, recognize affordances, and play your game. And if you're not adding that level of theming to your game, then you basically are making unplayable prototypes. It's a bad, you've created a bad feedback system in your prototype from the very start.
But does this mean
that
we will never again see a game like Go or Bridge, like a deep competitive strategy game that is basically themeless, that has a huge impact on the world and a broad popularity?
No, I think we'll have those. I think those will still exist, but they'll be in the context of Go and chess and all those existing games that are a mental model for doing stuff. So, like, I mean, board games, abstract board games are a thing, but they're in a tradition of abstract board games. Even Go came from a tradition of rolling around knuckle bones, that then were made into finer objects and then were made into, so on and so forth. Like, it's not, none of this stuff came from nowhere. So I think you can make those games, but I think you have to be relatively careful to say, hey, how do we introduce players to them in some way that they'll say, oh, maybe I should give you my time and effort and value to try this out. New platforms, by the way, are a wonderful place for this. Like, you saw a lot of abstract games on early mobile because people were like, I've got nothing else, and there's a thing there. Oh wait, I tap on stuff happens. I've got nothing pulling my time and attention away, and bored people who are isolated will deal with some of these challenges much better than saturated people who have tons of opportunity.
Yeah, I think one thing I just wanted to like push on a little bit more was because I agree with you about the affordances. I think that's definitely just true. However, I also think it applies to, okay, well, let's give our temporary art the correct affordances. So let's make our door look like a door. Let's make our little, swordsman look like a little swordsman. But it's all, it's all like MS Paint, very, very simple, like drawn in 2 seconds, no animations or anything like that. And I still think that there's something there, and I think that you're on it with the tradition, or which is what I'm thinking of as like the aestheticization of fun. Like certain things, like if we're thinking about a war game, we have Advance Wars and other games in that genre that operate a certain way, and we are tuned, like our brains are sort of like tuned to appreciate it in looking a certain way. In the same way that with abstract, tabletop abstract games, we're tuned to like a little piece that we move across the board and stuff like that. And so if you were to make some weird it's hard to come up with a good example with the abstract games because they're so simple, but my point with going back to like a war game is what I've been finding is that like you kind of need like a good amount of production value in order to communicate that, not the fantasy of the war game, but the fun as we've learned it in this tradition. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I think that's right. Zach Gage has some lovely stuff about the sort of two ways of thinking. I'm simplifying grossly here, which is basically like, are we using rote patterns or are we doing more exploratory sort of learning? And the incredibly hard work it is to put people into that exploratory learning stage, because most people want to use their existing patterns of learned behavior. They've learned what a game is. They've learned what a war game is. They've learned that they like war games. And then if your game doesn't look like a war game or doesn't signal that they should be using those patterns that they've learned over probably hundreds or even thousands of hours, then they're like, wait, I don't get to use my existing knowledge. I am out of here. Right. And then they immediately jump out of that experience.
Well, that is something. Oh, sorry, go on, Frank.
Oh, I was just going to say about Advance Wars. Do you know what the release date of Advance Wars was? It was September.
I don't.
It was September 10th, 2001.
Whoa.
Do you remember what happened the day after? Yeah. I always just found that like this very strange, because Advance Wars, of course, is so beautiful, this little candy-colored fantasy of harmless war. And
harmless, but also like super hyper clear with like the red team versus the blue team on a big battlefield. Exactly. That's a good point.
Classic symmetric warfare, right? Yeah, kind of like this. So anyway, I just always found that amazing.
Interesting.
I always thought it would be an older game. I guess not.
Well, Well, there.
I
Yeah.
unfortunately have to jump into my next call.
That's perfectly good. I also have to jump into my next call. Frank, you are welcome to join me for my next call if you want. You're more than welcome.
I would love to. I'll stick around for a little bit longer if you don't mind. Just be your sidekick.
Oh, awesome. That's perfect. Because
this was super fun. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I'll see
Dan.
you.
Bye.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually need to run really quick. 2 seconds. So Frank, you want to just like take over the show and talk about some random thing? What are you doing? What are you doing these days?
What am I doing these days?
Yeah.
I am playing a lot of Hearthstone Battlegrounds.
What?
I could talk about that.
Let's or yeah, you could talk about Hearthstone Battlegrounds or what you're working on. If you're you just had a couple of games. Oh, talk also. I can't wait for your new card game. By the way, I don't know if you've been talking about that publicly, but I'm very pumped for that.
Yeah, it's kind of